Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Tegwyll, Duke of Splendor. This is a black-blue fairies deck that comes to us from Shirok. Thank you for supporting the channel. And it's a really good one. This is built to be an upgrade from the pre-con, and I believe we're aiming for a bracket 3 strong and aggressive kind of token strategy built around Fairy Kindred. And I think we can definitely do this. I feel like it was ages ago that when we were on Eldraine. I don't know if I'm just old now, or I can't tell when we were there last, but I did really like the commanders that came out of there, especially our fairy commanders, especially Alela, especially Obira, I think, or Obira. I'm not sure. Someone correct me on this, but I really like the fairies that came out of this, and I do like the flavor of the Fae. Like, they're very interesting in terms of what blue-black can do. There's a lot of like mischievous things you can do with that. That being said, I think this deck is a very good start on doing some mischievous things in a lot of different directions. So without further ado, let's get right into it and take a look at our commander and see why they are the head of this deck. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Tegwyll, the Duke of Splendor? They are a 2/3 fairy noble for 3 mana, 1 blue and a black, 1 colorless blue and a black, 1 and blue and a black. I think that's the same thing. They're a flying Death Touch 2/3 that gives other Fae you control +1/+1. And they have a very important piece of text that says whenever another fairy you control dies, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So this is a very interesting card draw engine mixed with kind of a anthem effect on your commander. Now, this is the thing that I think is kind of interesting. Before we go any further and we start looking at the deck, I want to talk about the concept of a Fae deck and how that's kind of transformed. Because I would say there's about 3 to 4 types of Fae decks in EDH. And what's interesting is that this deck is running quite a few of the commanders of those Fae decks in itself. So we can kind of get this nice spectrum of how they work. I would say kind of the classic Fae deck would be built around Una, Queen of Fae. And Una, Queen of Fae wasn't really a Fae deck, it was more a kind of tokens go wide with an infinite combo if you can create infinite mana, because Una can just come out and mill out all your opponents. That's at least traditionally how I saw her. Una's a really cool character, and I thought it was a very, very fun kind of way to play Fae. And I will say as a note, it is worth noting that we are going back to Lorwyn Shadowmoor soon, so I'm expecting more Fae. So this is a great time to get into Fae. The other kind of commander, which Alela kind of stands in for, Alela Cunning Conqueror, is a very flash-heavy kind of deck that rewards you for casting spells on your opponent's turn. There's also like a 5 mana version, like a 5 mana legendary creature that also has some kind of effect that has flash, and also when you cast spells on your opponent's turn. So that's a whole archetype for Fae that you can play. I don't like it as much. I find it kind of puts too much weight on counter magic and selection, and you stop being an aggro deck, you start being a kind of like nobody can predict what I'm doing kind of deck. Which isn't as good. But I will say Alela herself is incredibly powerful, and it's nice to be playing her in general. Speaking of, I wanted to take a moment to talk about my favorite girl, Obira. Obira? I'm gonna say Obira, Dreaming Duelist, where she is a very good 2 mana commander that says whenever another Fae you control enters, each opponent loses 1 life. This once again is like the token method of building Obira, or of Fae, and I like that as well very, very much. So where does Tegwyll stand? So Tegwyll really feels like, once again, we've got this token synergy, but a kind of aristocrat's play. You know, as your Fae die, which you want them to do, you draw cards, which is good, which can set up your hand or set up the board in a way that you can just win the game very quickly. However, this current build is not really themed towards aristocrats. I think I'm going to at least mention one card that I think has to kind of go in the deck. But so we're just kind of using that second line of text fairly generally, where we want our Fae as they die to rebuy their kind of value on the board. And with tokens, and a lot of tokens, we can set ourselves up to drawing a lot of cards. To the point that I think it's actually very possible for us to lose the game from losing too much life to Tegwyll. But I mean, it's greatness at any cost. So with that out of the mind, or out of the way, let's talk about a few cards and a few ideas, starting with our curve and mana base. We are at 35 lands, and we have 24 of those lands as basics. That feels kind of wrong if you ask me. That is a lot of basics in a 2-color deck. I recognize there's not an infinite amount of 2-color lands, but there are at least more than this that I would very much so consider. Once again, we see Reliquary Tower in here, and I don't know to what degree I think it's very necessary. Reliquary Tower is the kind of card I don't particularly like, because I think you should just discard to hand size and move on, and not having access to a blue or a black pip is actually rather relevant in a deck like this that wants to use all of its mana pretty effectively. And even then, I still feel that 35 mana is a bit low, which brings us to the mana rocks. We're gonna look at curve in a second, but I just want to. This is the biggest thing that kind of stood out at me, like right at the start, where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana rocks. 2 of them do other things, I will say. That cuts this down to 6 mana rocks that are only mana rocks, and that feels really, really bad. I think I would be really happy to cut down to Soul Ring, maybe Arcane Signet, cut these 4 and make them like at least 3 of them into lands, and then up to you if you want to keep Midnight Clock and Misleading Signpost. I don't really like Misleading Signpost. I think it's a particularly weak, because it only changes 1 creature, which I think is not particularly worth the 3 mana. And holding this up and not having any attacks that really matter, or like your opponent attacks the player that you would want them to attack with a Misleading Signpost anyways, feels really bad. And I don't know if you're gonna have enough other things to cast. Like, you do have quite a bit of flash and other spells, but I still think the Misleading Signpost is too weak, so I would cut that as well. Go up to at least like 37 lands, and then we have some cuts to move on with. Looking at the curve, it's kind of wonky. I don't mind having a lower 3 mana curve because, and I feel like we haven't said this in a while, our commander's 3 manas, which means we generally want to cast them on 3. But what this 2 mana really puts pressure on is our 4 mana slot, because we're going to want to be double spelling as much as we can. That's not even including these spells we have that have like an alternative cost, such as Picklock Prankster with the Free the Fae, which is another cost we want to spend 2 mana on. And so we have like a really high 2 mana slot, which means 4 mana is where we can double cast, and 4 mana is our next highest mana cost after 2. So there's like this inherent, what do you say, an unsynergy, a non-bow, I guess, to how, or like, and there's this conflict in the curve that I don't really like. I think I would like to kind of remove some pressure on, because it is quite an important mana cost for us. We have some of our strongest cards are at 4 mana, so I'm definitely going to try to reduce some of the 4 mana cards. After that, the curve kind of goes out nicely, which I do like. I think it is still important that we do have quite a few high mana cards, which I'll go over them now. Like, let's just go over some of the cuts that I would like. Generally, looking at our creatures, I'm mostly happy. We definitely have a few Fae that feel too weak in comparison to the rest. Something like Quickling feels just kind of okay. I recognize Quickling is a nice combo with some ETB Fae, but even then feels particularly bad. Like, how many other cards do you have to cast in order for Quickling to be good? And if we're saying, well, Cursed, I want to use this as a combo with Spell Stutter Sprite, which is a very good Very good card. We're kind of in this weird situation where I have to come back and tap the sign about the 4 mana slot being already super stressed. So though I like it, I like Quickling, I think it's cute. I think it's probably too cute. A little further down, we have another one where we have, where is our Marsh Flitter? Feels just a little too weak. It does interesting things. I like that it makes tokens, but our deck is really invested in our tokens being Fey, so this feels just okay. The Sacrifice Outlet, once again, does not sacrifice Fey and therefore is not particularly good. This card is just far too weak in too many ways that I think you see play. Likewise, I just went over the Malleable Imposter. Feels really, really cute. Don't get me wrong, I think the ceiling on this card is really, really high, and I love its flavor, and I think it's a fun card. Also, Flash Clones are, you know, rare to have, and this is a pretty strong Flash clone. I just think, I don't know, I think cloning outside of a dedicated clone deck is very touch and go. And I would generally rather clone like any permanent. There's few clones that clone any permanent that I would like to clone creatures. I think when it comes to how this deck works, you want tokens to have the Fey text more than anything else. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of like little benefits for other creatures to have Fey, but generally you want them on your 1/1s or like your creatures you go wide with. The fact that this makes a creature copy into a Fey is not that good, right? Like, I don't think Sun Titan gets better for being a fairy in a deck like this, whereas you just want the Sun Titan effect. And once again, if we're going to cloning, I would rather clone something like either I want to clone my own things without the legendary tag to create a clone of my commander, or I want to clone my opponent's permanents like Smothering Tides, Rhystic Studies, things like that. I don't really want to clone just any creature, even at instant speed, is how I feel. I think this is fine to keep in, but I'm trying to pressure it because once again, it's in the 4-drop section, and I think we can do a little better. Rankle? Rankle feels a bit strange. Rankle belongs in this kind of chaos-style Fey deck. I do really like that he has haste. That is something I do enjoy, but all of the other effects seem just kind of okay. The each player discard card, I think that's fine. The each player sacrifices a creature is also just fine and good. And the each player loses 1 life and draws a card is neat because it kind of works with your commander. But I don't feel like this is greater than the sum of each of these parts. Like, each of these effects are kind of good in the right situation in a deck like this. Like, we're not pressuring our opponents enough for that first line, or frankly, that third line to really matter. And we're not punishing our opponents for drawing cards for that second line to matter. Like, why will we trigger this? Because this is an inherent card disadvantage as each of our opponents draw a card, and we draw 1, that's a 3-for-1. And since we can activate this line of text on our commander way better, just the draw a card, lose a life, it really feels like the weakest part of Rankle, which kind of sucks. So we've got a card with like just 3 so-so abilities, and when the thing I really like about it is that it has haste, it's not really speaking well to the strength of the card. 4 mana, I think I'm pretty happy to drop it. Once again, another kind of just subpar creature, Spellscorn Coven, is just kind of weak. Yeah, it's a 3-for-1, but like, I mean, I like that on a Burglar Rat. I don't like that on a 4-mana creature, and I don't particularly think Take It Back is worth it enough to kind of make up for what this card does. It is a cool, neat combo. You know, the idea is that you return, when your opponent has no cards in hand, you return their only spell to their hand, then you cast the Coven to then make them discard their card. But that's like a one-on-one strategy. This is just a card that all of its modes are overpriced, and then you're left with a 2/3 flying. Once again, we don't particularly care for that stat line. We prefer just to go wide, so it's weak. I love the flavor of this card. I like the 1 Fey is blue aligned, 1 Fey is black aligned. Really cute card, don't get me wrong. It just sucks. So we're not going to use it, I would say. Coming down to the higher mana cost Fey, I think the Archmage of Echoes is really good. I think this is great. I have no problem with it. Going to Fairy Formation, this is a very strong card, still very happy. I wish we could reduce the ability cost, but perhaps that's for a different deck. I still think this is very, very strong, though like I wish we had more mana, and maybe that feels weird when I'm taking out the mana rocks, but I don't think mana rocks are the thing that makes this better. I'm going to add some rampant in this in my additions, but like this is a really cool card that I think belongs in like very specific activated ability decks, which are just really, really cool. Puppeteer Click is an insane card. Una's great. And for our Shadow Puppeteers, this is one I have a pretty hard time with. Like, I think this card is really, really cool. Don't get me wrong. This is an insane overrun style attack that blue gets, and blue really, really rarely gets these kind of overrun abilities. And the fact that it stays on the battlefield is kind of cool. However, this card is definitely overpriced for what it is. And it's overpriced in exchange for some pretty cool abilities, don't get me wrong. But those abilities are probably not worth it. So like, this thing gets Ward 2 is part of the reason it goes up in price. And I'm very happy for it to have Ward 2. It's great, but I would rather it not have it if you can make this 6 mana or 5 mana. I think that would be way cooler. The fact that these dragons are 4/4s, really cool, but if they were 3/3s and this would cost an additional mana less, I would be really happy as well. Finally, this thing is a 4/4, which is crazy how strong this is while making the 2 creatures, which I should have put that on the list. Every part of this card just makes it more and more mana, and it is definitely like greater than the sum of its parts, but 7 mana is so much mana for this spell that you're definitely gonna want to have counter magic up when you cast this spell. So this is upwards of like 8 or 9 mana. And all this with the restriction that the creatures you control have to have flying. So it really only belongs in like dedicated flying or Fey decks. Once again, super cool. This is a weird card. I really, really want to cheat this into play. Like, I would, if I was allowed to like retool this deck a little more, I think I would think of reanimation when it comes to a card like this. Like, I really want to reanimate Shadow Puppeteers because I think pretty reliably fairy decks should be able to make 3 to 4 Fae, like one either creature Fae or token Fae that come out by the time you reanimate this creature. And just let's say we have 4 1/1 tokens, that is 16 damage on the turn this creature comes out. Not including the fact that this creates 2 1/1 Fae by itself, which once again makes it even more attractive to reanimate or to blink or anything like that. Like, this card is really strong, it just sucks how much mana. So I want to keep it. I want to. I don't know if I'm gonna say it, but like, I'm fighting the urge to say to cut this, but I will say maybe find a way to cheat this in. Really, really cool card. 6 and a blue sucks. At that mana cost, you're casting like full one-sided board clears in your Kindred decks. You're casting like, you're almost at the point that you can cast Rise from the Dark Realms or like those kind of style effects. Like, you have so much better cards that you could be casting at 7 mana. So it really, really sucks to be casting a card like that. Speaking of, we're going into some of our higher mana costs. I think Nightmare Unmaking is in the deck. Okay, that's why. It comes in the pre-con. This is probably needs to go. I think this is a weird kind of card that oftentimes you won't get it to do what you want it to do. It's neat that... So here's the inherent nombo. Like, I love when they put cards like this in decks like this. So as your tokens die, your hand grows, or even your creatures die, your hand grows, which means that the chances that each creature with power less than a number of cards in your hand includes your creatures grows, right? odds are Fae are pretty small. Odds are no matter when you use the second mode, you're wiping your own board. But that's the other funny thing is as your Fae die and your hand grows, this first mode gets worse because the number of creatures that have more power than the number of cards in your hand grow, like the number shrinks, right? So when you have this, it just gets worse as your deck does the thing it wants you to do. And it's a 5 mana board clear. So all in all, just toss this right out. It's really cool that this is exile. It's awful. Oh, it has exile, so you don't even get to draw the cards off your, yeah, just, you know what? Just burn the card. Don't even remove it, just burn it. This specific Kindred board clear is fine. I like that it gets flash. I wish there was some way that your Fae don't die from it, but it's cute. I love that Tegwyll is looking glamorous in this in this shot. This is some energy I can absolutely get behind. This is black mana at its finest. If you're not gonna look fabulous as you destroy your enemies, what is the point? But then we get to knowledge exploitation, and I'm not gonna say take this out because I know this is supposed to be 4 mana. I just don't know how often this card works. I'm sure it works. You know what? We're just gonna not think about it. It combos the turn after you play your commander. I'm just gonna say this must work because otherwise this card has to be just trash, right? This is way too much mana without the Prowl, and even then, it's not a good spell, I think, most of the time. Oh no, wait! I'm mixing these up. I'm thinking about this with the one that gets you the extra turn. It's not that one, right? Isn't there one? Yeah, okay. So you're just casting this for... Yeah, okay, I don't like this. Yeah, absolutely not. Sorry. I thought this was the one that when you Prowl, you get an extra turn. Obviously, that would be an insane card if we just added that line of text. No, I can't imagine this is good enough. Is it? Like, what do you grab nowadays? Like, reliably. You don't want to grab a board clear, most likely because you're ahead. So you're looking for a very powerful mass draw card. A very that's probably what you're gonna get in like blue. Even in green, you're probably gonna get a draw card. Or you're gonna get mass ramp in green, which might be worth 4 mana. It might not be. I don't know how many non-dedicated landfall decks are running very high like mana ramp cards or like treasure making cards. I don't think it's common enough. So then what do? You I guess you can maybe, if your opponents have like a mass discard spell in black or a really powerful single target removal or a reanimation spell. I just don't know if there's enough answers. Like, a lot of the things I want to steal aren't instants or sorceries. They tend to be creatures, enchantments, or artifacts. Is this still good? A lot of the other cards I'm thinking about have X spells, have like X costs, and then like you have to, other spells you have to rely on, like, yeah, like if they're playing Rise of the Dark Realms, that's phenomenal, but if they're not, you can't use any of those cards that steal all of your creatures and give them haste, like steal the board, because you've already done damage for the Prowl. Yeah, tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this is even remotely good. Like, I was already questioning it when I thought it had an extra line of text, and now I've completely gone the other... Yeah, no, I tell me if this is good. This really does not feel good. Okay, let's move on. Coming near the end, we're looking at the last few high mana cards. Illusionist Gambit, oh, it's in the precon, that's why. I was like, this is not a good card, but yeah, so I don't think this is good. I think this is a very easy cut, and it's another 4 mana card. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Knowledge Exploitation is also 4 mana. Just another bad thing about it. Okay, we're gonna come to the end. I'm gonna come back to the last few artifacts in a second. I just want to go to the enchantments. Coastal Piracy feels just fine. There's a lot of versions of this card that have extra lines of text. I would probably recommend those. Notably, one of them has Cycling, which I think is probably the best to play. Or I think there is the Shimmer that is a creature creature, and then when it dies, it comes back on the battlefield. I like that a little more as well. This is the classic one, but unfortunately it's been outpaced. But at the same time, do we just want Gix? I would rather probably just have Gix over this, but I leave that up to you. And then Reflections is great. I have no problem with that. So Door of Destinies, I feel like is really, really slow going. I understand what makes it very good, but it is not a fast card to get active, especially in a deck like this, because it does not trigger off of the tokens you create. So it has to trigger off actual factual casting of Fae, which I think is going to feel slow, and when it's not, it's going to be removed. So I generally don't think this is good enough, and I'd like to cut it. And on the flip side, Vanquisher's Banner just does not feel good enough. This is two modes that are overcosted when you look at your commander. The Anthem cost is way over. Like, no one's playing this for this cost. Like, we know this. No one plays Vanquisher's Banner for this line of text, so that's fine. But it is worth noting that we just get this off of our commander way cheaper, and so this is kind of undervalued. For those who might question what I just said, the first Anthem effect in your deck is often very good, but like the third, fourth, and so on, even the second one is often not great. Think about it this way. When you have a 1/1 Fairy Rogue, your first Anthem doubles its power and toughness. In order to get that effect again, you have to put 2 additional Anthems down. This is what diminishing returns is about. People who've played video games like RPGs their whole lives, like nerds like me, might intrinsically know this, but like basically the quality of these cards gets worse and worse the more you play. This is how I feel about doublers as well. So the first one's really good and the rest is bad, and this particularly sucks when the first one's in your commander, so the rest of them are even worse, I would say. But this other line of text, once again, just like the previous card, I think is an inherent, like, there's just tension with it, because like your deck benefits off of tokens, and killing your own tokens is way easier than casting your spells. So it's just an easier card draw engine, and this is just reliant on you doing the slower, more expensive thing that your deck is not built to do. So I think very easily this comes out as well. Note here, I guess. I understand why these cards are put into Kindred decks. Like, I understand fundamentally. Like, I see them in a lot of Kindred decks that are sent my way. And I like the idea, like, just like, hey, it's great to have cards that you can just put in Kindred decks. But that doesn't make them good cards in all decks, and I don't think that reputation is earned. I think Vanquisher's Banner belongs very much so in like elf decks, where you can generate tons and tons of mana to get all of those casts in, and reap the rewards really, really quickly. I don't think it necessarily should belong in dragons. I don't think it necessarily should belong in zombies, etc., etc. So like, though these are really cool Kindred cards, we still need to be very critical of them as they go into our deck, because otherwise we're building a deck that has 5-drops that just aren't good and really kind of fight against our main aggro play. All right, moving on. I think that's it. We're gonna go into additions. Yeah, let's go into additions. Okay, so it is, I think, actually a crime that this deck is not playing Skull Clamp. Just in general, for those who have never seen this card is bonkers, but also naturally just works so well with what you want to do. With your commander out, this represents 1 mana to draw 3 cards off of your tokens. Without your commander, it's 1 mana to draw 2 cards. That's still really good. Phenomenal card. Nothing more to say. Just play it. Nettling Nuisance is a card from the commander deck that's notably missing, and it is one of the ones I really, really like. I recognize this belongs in more of the quote-unquote Chaos Fairies build, but it's still phenomenally good. Like, it's really strong. You hit any of your opponents, every time you hit one of your opponents, you basically give them a goaded creature that can't block, and that's really strong. Like, I think this is probably a card I think is very underestimated of how cleanly and quickly it puts damage on the table. Yeah, there's going to be boards that these these pirates are just going to run themselves into 5/5s all the time. But that's not going to be every opponent, right? That's going to be very specifically like one of your opponents has this defense, and unless they're all going to work together, sure, let's say 2 of your opponents will attack into the 5/5 just to like spite you. It does happen. But what about the ones in the 5/5, right? If only one of your opponents does like contact damage with this pirate, or trades a creature with this pirate, I think Nettling Nuisance has done his job. A 3/1 flyer for 2 and a black that represents 4 additional, like baseline, 4 additional damage, or 1 creature basically edict every turn off a player. That's good, right? Like I genuinely think that's very, very strong. I also think it's very notable that these creatures don't have Decayed. Like, honestly, I think this card, maybe this card was built in mind with Decay at some point, because it makes way more sense for these pirates to have Decay to kind of make them more fair. Because in its current status, if one of your opponent can't lose the pirate tokens for any reason, which there are ways, like they can sacrifice them among other things, or just lose them in combat, those pirate tokens stack very, very quickly, and then all of a sudden they're doing quite a bit of damage to your opponents. And what I also really like, this is probably my favorite card I'm suggesting. I have so much to say. Something I like about the synergy of this card with your strategy is that the thing that stops this from like defeating you in the long run, because eventually goaded tokens will attack you when there's no other players. The thing that stops that is the fact that the thing that stops you stops this. What do I mean by that? I mean, when people wipe the board, it gets rid of the pirates. Outside of that, you should always have a board, right? Like, don't get me wrong, it's very hard for your deck to trade profitably, but these 4/2s, but that doesn't matter, because when it's you versus someone else at the end of the game and they have a few pirates left, you're aiming to just take them out. You're gonna block, like you're gonna throw fairies under the pirates if you need to survive, but otherwise you're an aggro deck. You're just gonna turn everything sideways at them as hard as you can, right? And I don't think this card is a problem in that way. I think this card is really, really strong. I want to test it. I'm getting really close to wanting to build this deck is what's happening. Slightly different, and probably with my favorite legendary fairy in the helm, but this is close, and this is the card that really gets me thinking about it. All right, let's try to speed up through the rest because I do have a few more to do. Sneaky Snacker is just notably missing as a card that you can keep reanimating and keep sacrificing, and every time you draw 3 cards, which your commander really allows to do, this comes back from the dead. This is a very good card. I think this is just barely not strong enough for Modern, despite being a Modern Horizons card at a common, but it's also just very strong. Like, I want to play with this in Pauper or something. It's just really easy to reanimate it. It doesn't have a can't be blocked clause. It's a 2/1, which makes it a 3/2 with your commander, which is a very decent body. And I think it's great that it's just really hard for your opponents to get rid of permanently. So I really like this card. It's an easy addition. Bastion of Remembrance stands in for any Blood Artist Zulaport Cutthroat effect. I just think like having the first one is probably worth a lot. I recognize this isn't built to be an Aristocrats deck, and this is my Aristocrats edition, but I think it's really good here. I think it'll do a lot for you, just to, even if nothing else, counter the life loss and make it so that you are very, very much ahead every time the board gets cleared. You draw a bunch of cards, but also you stay neutral on life, and your opponents take a pretty big decent hit, and I think that's very, very valuable for just 1 card at 3 mana. 2 1-mana Fae that I think are worth playing because of how this deck works in the aggro. Fairy Seer, I feel like could replace one of like the Opts or something. I think Opt, it can replace it pretty well. It's nice to have an early creature that you can start attacking with, or you can block with. This is a good target for blinking for those other blink effects, but also like Scry 2 early in the game, and late to an extent, but early in the game specifically, is really nice to help you hit your land drops or filter out additional lands you don't need. Later in the game, letting you get to, digging for the card you need and then using your commander to draw it is really nice as well. So I think this is pretty good. And likewise, the Fairy Dream Thief is very close to that. It surveils instead of scries, which is better than scrying, but it only surveils one. And I do like that this has a really fun kind of graveyard ability to benefit from basically the fact that, you know, you're gonna let this die and later cash it in for some cards. We've seen cards like this before. There was a frog from Strixhaven, but I think this is very much so much better on Typal. Like this is much better as a Fae than a frog ever will be. And I think it's also just really good in the kind of strategy you're trying to build. Very quickly, a deck like this is really good at carrying equipment. Here, I'm suggesting Sword of the Animist, Sword of Hearth and Home, and Bitterthorn. Your selection of these, it is mind-blowing how expensive these cards are. Sword of Hearth and Home went up real fast. I did not expect that. And Bitterthorn is like $30, which is also really, really surprising. So if you have these, play them. If you don't play, I think the Sword of the Animist is like $6, it says, off of the Commander deck. Grab that if you can. But we are a deck that naturally has evasion, and we are a deck that really, really benefits from any form of ramp. So putting those two together to basically cast one of these, attach it once, and at least get that first, you know, land off of it is going to make a really big difference. Then later in the game, you can keep attaching it and keep attacking with it. But these are going to do way more work than any Mana Rock ever could. So I really like them in this deck. I think they're particularly strong and worth considering. There's a bunch of other equipment you can be playing, by the way, but these are the ones that caught my eye the most. There's definitely other things. I'll leave that up to you, but note that your Fae are really good at carrying equipment. Coming near the end, Haunted One I felt was noticeably absent. What's really cool is that I like this as an additional kind of Anthem effect. +2 power is really relevant with Fae, and it's very nice to have it on one card, so I do like that. But that Undying text is not nothing. We definitely have at least 2 very relevant persist creatures that I think that Undying plays with really, really well, right? Because you basically, you can time it so they come back with Undying, and they now have a +1/+1 counter, so it doesn't matter if they have persisted or will persist. It just puts them in a pretty good situation. Works well with like a lot of those creatures like the Fairy Seer and stuff like that to make them a little stronger. I think this is just kind of a cool card. It's not as good as like with Partners, because with Partners this card is insane, but still good with just any Kindred deck in black that likes to go wide, and this is one of them. Another card that, just like speaking of anthems, that I really think should be played is Favorable Winds. I just think it should be in here. It's very cheap, and it's very, very meaningful for that second anthem effect, right? I was talking before of how those anthems kind of like degrade in quality, but they do that less when they're not 5 mana. Favorable Winds, I think, is way, way better than the Vanquisher's Banner. Once again, I know the Anthem is not why we're using that card. Doesn't matter. I think the Favorable Winds and your commander working together to give that +2/+2 is really, really strong. And then you have some insurance if a commander leaves play, or you don't care and you're just hitting with 3/3s. I think it's just very, very good, and I like having it. I think this is the last card. No, second last card. Fran's Vigil. This is weird. I talked about the Undying. I talked about the Haunted One, and I've kind of split. These next 2 cards are the 2 halves of it. So Favorable Winds being the Anthem. Fran Vigil is the Undying, but more specifically the anti-persist mechanic. I think this is just worth considering because your 2 persist cards are really, really good. And the way Thran Vigil works, for those who don't know, is that if you use the persist ability on a creature, the Thran Vigil will be triggered after the creature's back in play. You can target that creature with a Thran Vigil, and it'll remove the -1/-1 counting. That basically allows you to persist forever. And with the Puppeteer Clique, that's really good because Puppeteer Clique is a nuts card. But the blue card, the where is it? I never remember what it's called, but I'm always so impressed by it. right? The Glen Elendra Archmage. This thing is nuts, right? 1 blue, sack this creature, counter target non-creature spell, and then it persists back on the battlefield. But of course, if we're just constantly doing that, if we have the means and nobody can interact and we have the mana, that Archmage can now counter every non-creature spell for the rest of the game, which is just insane. So though this is a very specific kind of card, which might require some more, support, like we have Sneaky Snacker, but a few other reanimation cards, all of a sudden we have a card that is generally good. You just put counters on your commander as you reanimate creatures, or like are exiled during your turn, which is another thing you can do. But, oh wait, it's during your turn. I'm going to Magic jail. I guess this doesn't necessarily work with the Archmage, but I still think it's pretty neat. I'm just going to pretend we didn't put this section in, and I'm going to move on. Alright, last card I wanted to talk about is Predator's Hour. Predator's Hour is very near and dear to my heart, but consistently I do get the feeling that I'm putting it in the wrong decks. And so I want to suggest it here because I think this is the kind of deck it belongs in. Predator's Hour is a different kind of payoff for going wide. Whereas a lot of our payoffs traditionally are, increasing a lot of power, Predator's Hour is a pseudo draw effect. We've had things like this, like we have Una's Black card as like a discard effect when going wide, which I really like. For those in black and green, there's Driven to Despair. Despair is also like discards cards. Driven draws cards, but we don't have access to that. What we have access to is Predator's Hour. Basically, this makes every single one of our creatures have Menace. This is kind of gravy, as we are an evasive deck as is, but all of our creatures gain Menace, and when they hit one of our opponents, we get their top card. For the rest of the game, we've basically stolen it. And one, I think that's really cool with Fae. I think it's very on flavor. But two, due to the nature of how this deck plays, it's pretty reasonable to attack with 6/1/1s. And Predator's Hour being able to turn that into a draw 6 or a pseudo draw 6 for 2 mana, I think is really, really good. The downside is when you are behind, this card is awful. But this deck doesn't have tons of cards that are really bad when you're behind. So I do think it's definitely worth playing. And that's it. That's that's all I have to say. We've hit 42 minutes. I'm gonna cut it real soon. I will say, if you could play Night's Whisper, you'd make me happy. Thank you so much for sending this deck. This is really fun. It really has me going. I really immediately want to start playing Obira all of a sudden. So we'll see what I build. But otherwise, big fan of this deck. I think this is really cool. And I think the suggestions I have will make it a little stronger. There's definitely some game changers you can put in, but I'll leave that up to you. Thank you so much. Good luck and happy deck building. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.